everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is our DIY on installing the Cende Valvetronic exhaust. We were hoping to get the test pipes put in from Cende as well as the exhaust, but when I took it over there, we had issues getting our OEM catalytic converters off. I've already had those gutted, so they've been worked on before, and I'm sure they were worked on before that, but one of the bolts holding the catalytic converter to the headers was actually stripped pretty bad, and so we ran the risk of potentially not being able to get that off without going through a full day endeavor, and it was just awful. And I didn't want to cut my OEM gutted cats out. I wanted to keep them intact, because if I wanted to, we could cut them and get access to the bolts easily and make sure we get it off, but I just didn't want to do that. So we opted to leave the OEM cats on there, which, like I said, they're already gutted, so they're essentially acting as test pipes anyways. I know I was going to try and do a DIY on the test pipes, but guys, if you don't have the right tools, it's not a DIY job. The only way it's going to be DIY is if you actually cut your OEM cats to get access to all the bolts. If you want to do that and you have the tools to do that, then great, go in there, be careful, cut them out, and yeah, it's actually pretty easy if you do that. But if you're trying to remove your catalytic converters and keep them intact, it's not a DIY job. You have to lower your transmission, you have to drop your subframe a little bit, you've got to do a lot of work, you have to have a lot of special tools. There are other videos online that show how to do all this and are successful in getting it done, but I'm telling you, if you're just got your car in jack stands, you're not going to really be able to do this very easily. So I would just say take it to a reputable shop to swap out test pipes if you're going to do that. But other than that, we've got the install for the Valvetronic exhaust. It's a long video, I know that, but I try to be as detailed as possible for you guys. There's lots of commentary and whatnot, so make sure you watch the whole thing. What I will do in the description is I will break everything down by the time. So when we do downpipes, I'll put a timestamp on that so you can go to that, and I'll try and break that up in the description for you guys, so it's a little bit easier to click through and find what you're looking for. But so far, I really like the exhaust on the car. There's a few sound clips in the video. It's not a full, there's not going to be a full example of all the sounds of the exhaust in this video, just because there's so many options with the Valvetronic that I'm going to make an entire video dedicated to that. So look out for that one in the near future. One thing that I will say, when the valves are closed, it's really, really quiet. I mean, you can tell there's an exhaust, but it sounds great. It actually sounds really good. There's no drone at any speed. There's no rasp or anything like that. It's awesome. Now, when I go with the valves open, since my car has gutted cats and non-resonated downpipes, it is loud, and there is rasp at low RPMs under load, and there's pretty good drone when you're cruising at highway speed and getting on the gas, but that's to be expected with it because it's almost straight piped at that point. So I've been working with Cende to eliminate the rasp issue, because that's the biggest complaint on these motors, and the sound is rasp when you have gutted cats or test pipes and non-resonated downpipes. And so I'm working with them to hopefully get a different set of downpipes made and sent to me, maybe some with some resonators, maybe an X pipe. It looks like we're probably going to put resonators on a set of downpipes and send them and see if that fixes the issue. And so I'm waiting to get those, and then I'll be doing the entire sound clip video for you guys. But I do love the exhaust. I love being able to turn it on and off, and I love the sound of it, especially when it's wide open throttle. It just sounds mean. Once we get the rasp issue at low RPMs under control, I think this exhaust is going to be one of the best exhausts on the market for our cars, especially for the money. People have been asking about a price. These exhausts, for stainless steel, for the entire exhaust, we're talking downpipes all the way back, all wiring, everything, are $583 plus shipping. So if you're looking at about $1,000 ship for a full Cende Valvetronic exhaust, and that's just awesome, and the quality is great. So it's hard to beat that. For titanium, I think you're looking at about $1,200, maybe $1,300 shipped if you want to do the titanium route. But anyways, hope you guys enjoy the video. Leave your comments below. Let me know what you think, and like and subscribe, and we'll see you for the next video.
Okay, so the first thing you want to do once you get the car secured on jack stands and you've removed the bottom covers, you need to remove the cross brace that is attached to your car. If you don't know how to do this, you can go to our ZF8 transmission fluid change DIY, and it'll show you step by step how to remove it, how to put it back on, including torque specs for the bolts. Just use caution for the wires that are attached to it. But once you get this removed, you'll have access to where your downpipes connect to your catalytic converters, as you can see there, and that's where people have issues getting to the top bolt. But before you start removing those top bolts, you're going to want to go to where your downpipes connect to your mid mufflers. So if you're looking at this clip here, the downpipes move off to the left, the mid mufflers off to the right. So loosen the bolts on the sleeve clamps and get those ready, because once you're done with that, you can go back to the downpipe and you can start to remove the bolts on the OEM downpipes. Okay, so you can see my friend Nico removing the bolts off of our OEM downpipes. He's using a extension with a wobble bolt on the end for the nuts. This made the job super simple. I think we got both sides unbolted in just a few minutes using these tools here. If you don't have the right tools for the job, it'll be a lot harder, but I would definitely suggest investing in these. But the other thing that we did beforehand was we sprayed some penetrating oil on all the bolts. The big thing in here is when you're breaking these bolts, go real easy. Do not strip the bolts. Do not break the studs that are attached to your catalytic converters, or else you're going to have a really, really bad day. Take your time here. Do not use impact guns or anything like that either. Once you've got your downpipe unbolted from your catalytic converter, go ahead and remove them from the car and set them aside for storage. Remember, there's a metal gasket that's located between your downpipes and the catalytic converters. I would highly suggest replacing that with another OEM replacement. That doesn't come with the exhaust, so you have to get that on your own. This is the socket and extension that we use to remove the bolts from the downpipes. You can see the wobble socket on the end, and that length of extension allowed us to get a good angle on the bolts. Here we are putting our new exhaust gasket on the catalytic converters in preparation of installing our new downpipes. Before you do that, you want to take your new sleeve clamps and slide them onto your mid mufflers. Now keep in mind, we're just doing the downpipes here, and I'm eventually going to swap out the mid mufflers when I get home. So you'll see me mess with those again later on whenever we put the new mid muffler section on. But here's a video of me lining up the new non-resonated downpipes and getting them on the car. I'm just getting it lined up on the studs that are on the catalytic converter, and then getting it lined up with the mid muffler and getting the sleeve on. And once I'm done with that, then I'll tighten the sleeves up. You do that for both sides and you'll be good to move on to the next section. Whenever you're reinstalling your new downpipes and you're putting your nuts back onto the studs there to tighten it all the way down, make sure you start it by hand and ensure that they aren't cross-threaded. If you cross-thread something here or you snap a stud, you're just going to have a really bad time. So start everything by hand, and then when you torque it down, do it all by hand. Don't use any kind of impact tools for this. But make sure they are really tight, and make sure you seat that new exhaust gasket in there really well to prevent any kind of an exhaust leak.
What's up, guys? So we just left Audi from trying to do the test pipes and whatnot, and unfortunately when we got the downpipes, the OEM downpipes off, and we went to start to remove the stock catalytic converters, we found that one of the nuts on one of the catalytic converters was stripped pretty bad from the last time that it was removed and put back in, and unfortunately that made it near impossible to get it off with the tools that we had available there. The guy that was working on it, Nico, he's an Audi tech, and he's got stuff at his dealership to do it, but we didn't have it there, and we just decided it would be better to go ahead and leave the stock cats on, which mine are gutted, so I mean they're basically a test pipe anyways, and so there should be very little difference between those and the test pipes from Cende. So I'm not too torn up about it. I mean, yeah, a little bit bummed that we didn't get to do that, but what I will say is that test pipes are not a DIY job. If you don't have a lift, if you don't have very special tools, and you don't have knowledge of this, then you're not going to be able to complete it on your own at home. It is a nightmare to get to the 3 bolts that hold each test pipe up, or connect the test pipes to the exhaust manifold. They are almost impossible to get to without a specialized tool to do so. So I would not suggest attempting to do test pipes at home unless you're committing to cutting them out. That's about the only way you'll do it at home, is to cut the stock catalytic converters to give you access to the bolts. In that sense, yeah, you should be able to do it pretty easily as long as you have the right tools for that. But we did get the non-resonated downpipes in, and the car actually sounds surprisingly good right now with the non-resonated downpipes. They're mated to the stock mid-muffler and rear mufflers. On the way home right now, and hopefully we'll have the rest of the Cende Exhaust installed here, but it actually sounds really good. The heat wrap that I put on the downpipes seems to be keeping drone down. From other cars I've heard that are non-resonated with downpipes, they have a lot of drone when you're driving, and I don't. And I'm attributing that pretty much to the heat wrap, because it's just 2 pipes. But the one thing about the heat wrap, if you didn't know this, as it's heating up and curing, it smells horrible. So we're gonna have to deal with that smell for a little bit. But other than that, really happy with it. So we're gonna head home and get to putting on the rest of the exhaust.
Morning, guys. Day 2 of our Cende Exhaust install. I didn't finish it up yesterday just because we got a little bit pressed for time when I came home. But all we have to do today is get the mid muffler and the 2 Valvetronic rear mufflers installed and get them wired up. We're only going to be installing the cigarette lighter plug to get them wired up, just make sure everything's working correctly. We're not going to hardwire anything today. But I'm also not going to be putting in the OBD2 wire, just because I don't need to do that. When I do that, I want to run it right and run it underneath the carpet and seats and whatnot. So that'll be another day if I decide to do that. But I feel like this should go pretty smoothly. Shouldn't be too bad. So we're going to get the car on jack stands and get to working. All right, guys, so before you start getting underneath the car and tearing out your OEM exhaust, you want to make sure you have all your parts needed, you have everything ready to go. That way you don't get your OEM exhaust torn apart and then find out that you're missing something and you can't install the rest of your exhaust. So the kit comes with 8 of these exhaust clamps. You guys already saw the other exhaust clamps that we used to mount the downpipes to the mid muffler on the OEM mid muffler. You'll see those again in a little bit when we swap out the mid muffler, but we have 8 of these clamps, and so we need 1 for each exhaust tip, so that's 4. And then you need 2 to connect the downpipes to the mid muffler, and then you need 2 to connect the mid muffler to the left and right rear mufflers of the vehicle. So we're good to go here. Another thing to show you guys while I've got the tips off the car. So one thing to think about, we all like our carbon fiber tips here, if you get the metal ones, anything like that. But if you want to protect them for a long time, now is the time to ceramic coat them or do some kind of way to protect them. I took these to my buddy Jake, who runs a detailing shop here in Wilmington, North Carolina. Jake's Detailing. Everybody go hit him up. He's awesome. But I dropped these off with him this week, and he ceramic coated the carbon fiber for me. That way these things should stay nice and clean, or they should clean up super easy. I highly suggest you go ahead and do that while these are off the car. It'll be a lot easier for you. The second thing, and this is going to apply to the pipes underneath the car as well as these tips. You can see the openings in the pipe here. These are cut in obviously to allow this to get over your exhaust pipe. But when you put the clamp on, you put these on, you want to make sure that when you get the clamp all the way on, let me loosen this up a little bit. And you get these on here, you want to make sure that the clamp is actually covering that keyhole. That way you know you're far enough over the pipe. Don't go all the way up here, but you want to make sure you're covering that keyhole and make sure that you clamp down there. If you do too far back here, it might not get covered enough and you could have a potential exhaust leak from the keyhole. So make sure that's covered. That's going to apply to the mid muffler as well, and you'll probably see that in the video, but I want to make sure I talked about it before we got underneath there. Before we move any further with wiring, we need to get all the stuff out of our trunk and get access to our battery. You want to remove the negative terminal cables so that you don't have any power going to the vehicle. You're going to be messing with electronics, you don't want to mess anything up, and you don't want to hurt yourself. The next thing I did was spray some WD-40 on all the exhaust hangers. This is the mid muffler, and there's 2 hangers on each side of the mid muffler that I sprayed. And then of course you have the hangers for each of your left and right rear mufflers that are on the back of the car. While I let the WD-40 soak into the hangers, I went ahead and got my jack and a piece of 2x4 to put underneath my downpipes. This way I could support the downpipes while I changed out the mid-muffler. Now keep in mind, if you're changing your exhaust all at one time, then everything's going to come down at once. So when your downpipes come off, then you can move to your mid-muffler and pull that off. But remember, I was at a shop that put in my downpipes first while I was up on a lift, and now I'm at home on jack stand, so I had to do it this way. So once you have the downpipes supported, if they're installed on the car, you can go ahead and move to the mid-muffler exhaust hangers. And I just used a longer flathead screwdriver to wedge into the exhaust hangers and pry them off. The WD-40 really aids in helping those slide off of the car because there's all sorts of dirt and grime located in them from being underneath the car. So make sure you do spray some kind of lubricant, penetrating oil, something like that to aid in getting your exhaust out of the exhaust hangers. By the way, make sure you're wearing some kind of protective eyewear while you're doing this stuff under the car. There's lots of dirt and whatnot in the area and it could fall down into your face. Don't want to get into your eye. But once you get your exhaust hangers on your mid-muffler removed from the vehicle, you can go ahead and remove the sleeve clamps from your downpipes. Once again, if you're doing this all at once at home, then you've already got your downpipes off more than likely. So at that point, you can go ahead and work towards the rear mufflers on the left and right of the rear of the car. And once you get those hangers out, then the entire exhaust will come down because your mid-muffler is all one piece from your mid-muffler to your rear mufflers.
Alright guys, just once again I want to show you this. This is one of the two clamps that connects your downpipes to your mid-muffler. And once again you see the slit there that gives some space to allow you to go over the downpipe, but you see a little keyhole at the end. Remember, when you put these back on both sides, you want to make sure that the clamps cover the keyhole because that will stop it from having an exhaust leak, okay? And that also gets it, you're far enough onto the pipe there. So whenever you actually put this together, there might be a gap between the actual two exhaust pipes, but that'll be sealed up by this. So make sure you cover that keyhole and then you tighten it down really good and you should be good to go. And a note on tightening these clamps, when you get these on the pipe, you'll see it when I get them on there. You want your actual nut here to be facing down, but you don't want it down to where things that go into the car could potentially catch on it. So make sure you get them angled up and out of the way to where the bottom of the clamp is what's facing the down or the bottom part of the pipe. But also leave this at an angle that you can get a socket to this to tighten it up. One design thing that I think could be improved on here, there's not a recess here for a set-in, like bolt to where this can get into the clamp and not spin. So you're going to have either another socket, a socket wrench, or something on top to hold this to stop it from spinning while you tighten this down until it gets to a certain point, and then you can continue to torque it down. But just remember that this will start to spin at some point when you're either tightening this or loosening these. You're going to have to stop it.
Once you have your mid-muffler removed from your downpipes, you can go ahead and go up towards your left and right rear mufflers. There's a hole in the bottom of the bracket. You can see where my screwdriver is going through there. That'll give you an area to get leverage onto your exhaust hanger. Make sure you've got your hand on this hanger because once you pry it out, make sure you have a hand on your muffler because once you pry it out, it's going to start to fall because, once again, this is all one piece from your mid-muffler to your rear mufflers. And it took me a little bit longer to get the driver's side hanger off. I had to mess around with it. Eventually, you'll see me use a pair of pliers to wedge it all the way off. Now, once you get this last hanger off, this is the last thing holding your exhaust in, it's going to fall down. So just be careful. Make sure your face isn't under it or make sure you have a hand on it to catch it. So once everything's removed, you can see the exhaust just kind of hanging there. There's a cross brace underneath the car. That's what's holding the midsection of that mid muffler up. You just have to kind of maneuver it out and over it. It just slides right out. And then you have to make sure you have enough room to be able to slide your exhaust out from underneath the vehicle.
Alright guys, we just got the OEM catback exhaust off. As you can see, it's all one piece, which it's pretty easy to get out, but while it might have taken a little bit longer to unbolt another set of clamps, I think it would have been nicer to have this in two pieces. I mean, I guess you could always cut it somewhere right there, get your own clamps if you want to, but it's going to make it difficult to store this thing. I'm going to have to probably put it up there, or maybe up here somewhere, get it up out of the way because I don't want this taking up room in my garage. So anyways, we got that out, so now we can get under there, and what we have to do is we have to get underneath the car next and get under the bumper in this area and whatnot, and we have to figure out how we're going to route our lines, and we have to figure out how we're going to get our electrical lines from underneath the car and into the trunk of the car so we can get it all plugged up. Once we figure that, we'll actually run the lines, and then we'll install the exhaust, plug it all up, and get it going.
Okay guys, it's time to start getting your wires routed. Once again, as you can see on the video, make sure your battery is unplugged before you start messing with this stuff. But your center cover, or I'm sorry, your side cover there just pulls out. It's not connected by any screws. Once you get it pulled out, be careful because your 12-volt wire is connected to the actual socket there, and you just have to press in some tabs and pull it out. It pulls out really easily. Set the cover aside, and then we're going to start looking at where to route these wires.
Okay, so alright, so now we're underneath the car where your passenger side mufflers be. So this is the one that I'm hoping just goes straight shot up through the middle there. Hopefully we'll be able to just puncture a hole through it. That way we can keep everything weather sealed. Then your wire off your passenger side muffler just goes straight up through it. If I have to run my passenger muffler wire across, I'll be able to come up and just come around through here. I'll probably be able to drill something through here, maybe to zip tie stuff so that it stays up nice and high, stays nice and dry, and then route it in there as well. Maybe there's another spot that I can get into the trunk cavity from the passenger side and then run the wires on the inside of the trunk. We'll take a look at that in a little bit. But then that first place that I showed you that was on the side where that other wire's coming out, that's gonna be like up here, like up on the side of that cavity, like way back there. That's gonna be kind of hard to run something through. So I'm putting a lot of hope into this guy.
Okay, so to pry this grommet out, I just used a scraper, something that had like a thin flat edge that was wider than a screwdriver to get up underneath it. And basically I pried a piece of it up and kind of just worked it around, got my finger there and just worked it all around, and it just popped right out.
Okay, everybody, so we found where we're going to be bringing the wires into the trunk from. Here's the plug that came out. We want to keep this as weather sealed as possible, and you'll see other weather seals underneath there where basically the wires are going through these plugs. So what we're going to do is we're going to take out the wires here. This is the OBD2 wire, which I don't plan on using. That is what we're going to be using to power the entire Cende setup. Then you've got another connector here, another one here. So what I think, obviously the directions are in Chinese, but what I think happens is each of these plugs into the solenoid. Then these run to our control module, which says valve. I'll bring it up closer. It says valve, valve, and then ACC. So this is going to plug into ACC for power. Each of these are going to plug into the valve connections. And then, so obviously this entire setup will be located inside of the car. These are going to be two running out to the mufflers. This is also going to be just connected to the OBD2 port if we wanted to do that. So the only wires that are going to be coming out of the trunk area and actually come out underneath the car are going to be these two wires. So we just need to have enough space in this to get them through. Now the problem is that is a large connector, so we might have to haul out the whole thing here. As you can see, the whole center of it.
So we're going to try that, and that way we can at least have this in there to protect the sides of this so it doesn't rub on the actual metal of the trunk and fray it up. So we'll get working on that.
All right, so we're going to take the rubber grommet and then take something really sharp, like an X-Acto knife is perfect because it's got a nice thin blade that's really sharp. And I just cut an X pattern. I went a little too far on it, but it still worked out well. So I just cut a cross pattern in the middle of the grommet, and this is going to allow me to get the wires through while maintaining a good seal around the wires so that we don't have to deal with moisture or fumes or anything like that coming from underneath the car. Now, as you can see here, the plug for the cable is still just way too big to go through that without just cutting a ton of rubber out, and we don't want to lose that. And so what I did was I took a spare latex glove and I just cut the finger off of it, and I wrapped it around the end of the cable itself and sprayed it with some WD-40 to lubricate it, and then we just pushed that through, went right through, and I could do that for both cables, got them both through without having to actually tear out all that rubber from the grommet, and we were able to maintain the weather seal and maintain a good seal around the cable itself. Now we're going to take our cables with the grommet already passed over both of the cables. We're going to feed both ends of the cable that go into the manifold of the Cende system and push them up into the car. Get a bunch of cable up there so that they don't fall out, and then you're going to push your grommet back into the body of the car to seal everything up there. And then once you've got that in place, you can actually pull the cables in and out as needed, and you don't have to worry about them falling out.
Okay guys, so that plug that we just used, where it comes out at, I was a little bit mistaken. It doesn't come out of one of the ones I showed you earlier. It comes out back here. You see this kind of foam insulation? You can see we got our two plugs right here, ready to go. And you can see where they're coming out. They're coming from behind. So when you push them up through there, they'll be hidden behind that. So you just have to reach your hand back there and grab them, and then you can pull them up into this cavity here. It's actually really, really simple. So we got that done. We can go ahead and start running the wire across, and we can start putting the exhaust in.
To make life easy when it comes to running your control cables for your Valvetronic mufflers, you're going to want to remove your rear diffuser off the vehicle. If you don't know how to do this, we got a video on this as well. We actually uploaded it not too long ago. It's really simple to do if you follow our DIY, but remove the diffuser and that'll give you access to everything there that you're going to need to be able to run these cables to keep them up and out of the way. It'll keep them safe from falling on anything hot. You'll be able to use zip ties to secure them, as you'll see in a little bit. Highly recommend you do this. It'll make life a lot simpler. Okay, with your diffuser removed, you can see your crash bar, and there's 2 points that it mounts to the body of the car, and then there's a long metal piece that goes along the rear of the car bumper there. That's what I was just showing you. We're going to take the wire that's going to go to the passenger side Valvetronic muffler. Actually, I'm sorry, you're going to take the wire that goes to your driver's side, and you're going to route it up over the crash bar connection, the one that connects to the body there, and you're going to run it along the top of the actual crash bar. And when you feel up there, you'll feel there's a little lip that you can rest the wire on, and whenever you decide to get zip ties on this to secure it, you'll be able to secure the wire along the crash bar, and it won't be able to fall down or get in the way of anything else. It's a pretty natural path to run a wire up there, so it should make a lot of sense to you once you get underneath there and start messing with it. The way I used the zip ties, I didn't have any that were long enough to go around the giant crash bar, so I just took 3 of the ones that I had and I put them together to make just one giant zip tie, and it gave me enough room that I could keep it loose and then eventually tighten it all down once I was ready to, and then I just snipped the ends off of it whenever I had everything secured. But remember, you want to keep these loose at first because you're going to have to pull this cable back and forth, and you want to make sure you have enough slack in your zip ties that allows you to pull your cable back and forth, because you're going to have to do some adjusting once you actually get the exhaust installed.
So my video cut out, but I just wanted to let you guys know that I got this wrapped around the cord when it goes over top there, just to make sure it stays in place there as well. You know, the last thing we want is this cord moving around a whole bunch. So I got one here, a bunch down the center beam here, and then another one on the other side of the crash support as well. That way we keep it there. They're all loose right now. That way once we get everything installed, we can pull the wires around and make sure we have enough slack. And then once everything's in place, we'll tighten them all down and trim it up.
So now that we have everything ran and we have zip ties on it, we're gonna go ahead and pull the slack out from the driver's side cable. We're just gonna pull it along the crash bar. You don't need a ton of the cable on the side where your muffler is, but you do want to leave some so that you can plug it in, and then you'll do one final adjustment whenever you get it plugged in. But you don't want to have a ton of loose cable there, because the last thing you want is that cable to fall down and rest on something hot and start to melt. So you want to make sure that you've got the right amount of slack and not too much. Once you get your cables ran under the car and you've got the right amount of length, you want to pull all the slack into the trunk of the car. That way you can plug everything up to the manifold, and then you can roll your wires together, zip tie them to make sure they're all nice and clean. One thing I would suggest doing is zip tie all the wires that run underneath the car to some spot inside that cavity so that they can't fall back down.
Okay, so here's a quick tip, guys. The wires are ran. We're getting ready to actually start to put on the rest of the exhaust. What I would suggest doing, just to make sure everything lines up right and just to make it easy on yourself, is keep your OEM cat back out here and then get the rest of your parts to your Cende Exhaust and then line them up. And that'll make it really easy to figure out which way pipes need to go into the car. So we got our center muffler, and you can see the center muffler is pretty far back on it. It's not replacing that. That's just all straight piped through here. It's replacing that OEM X pipe. That's where that mid muffler is. So you know that the mid muffler goes to the rear of, well, technically, yeah, towards the rear of the car. So you got that lined up. Then you move up and you've got these two connector pipes, and you can see the curvature is a little bit different, but you can see that's a longer pipe than this one is. And you can see that's a longer pipe and goes out, and that's a shorter pipe. So you know that those go that way. And plus, that's almost a 90, where that one's just a little bit more angle. Might be hard to tell here. And so you put those up, and then you know that the solenoids are going to be facing up on the car. So you put those up and they line up really well with the rest of the exhaust. It just, you can see that angle matches that angle, this angle matches this angle. That's how you can figure out which side goes where really easily, and you don't get confused when you start to put the stuff on the car. Now we're gonna get to putting this together. The one thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna be spraying down every hanger. So you see the hanger there. I'm gonna be spraying down each of those with some kind of lubricant, and I'm also going to be probably spraying the actual hangers themselves. That way these slide in real easily and I shouldn't have to fight with them too much. I was thinking about installing the tips on before I put the vehicle, or put the mufflers on the vehicle, but I think I'll have plenty of room to do that once they're on, and I don't want to damage the tips moving this stuff around, so I'm going to leave them off for now. If I get it up there and it looks like it's going to be a tight fit, then I'll take it down and put them on, but I think I'll be all right. So let's get going and get this thing finished up. Hey guys, just a heads up, these plastic hanger covers that come on the exhaust, my garage is cold and they're really tough and they don't slide off easily, so I just used a razor blade and cut them. You can probably also just get a piece of or a pair of pliers and pull them off, but cutting them off worked really well. All right, another tip guys, use something to put your exhaust on so you can slide it under the car without damaging it. You know, we don't have a lift, so we're not just carrying it over and putting it up. You're gonna have to position it under there, then you're gonna have to crawl under there and put it up. I'm telling you, if you don't have any of these old school foam camping pads, they're cheap as hell and they're great for doing work on the ground like this. I've got a square cutout that I just use for my knees if I'm working down the side of the car. This is the rest of it, and I've got another one rolled up over there. Super cheap, great for working on cars. It'll make you not hate life after an hour of being on your knees working down here. So get something. I mean, you can use the bubble wrap that it came in if you want to, but I definitely suggest getting some of these like little foam camping mats that you used to use probably when you were a kid camping. Really good. So anyways, we're gonna get on to putting the mid muffler.
You've got your downpipes on. Now it's time to mount up the mid-muffler. The way that the mid-muffler orients is the side of it that has the longer pipes needs to go over that brace, and that's what's going to connect to your downpipes via those sleeves. But what you want to do is get it mounted and then just put each side of the muffler's hangers on there, and that'll keep that in place so that you can do the work when it comes to connecting it to your downpipes. It's super simple to put your muffler hangers in there. I would suggest maybe hitting it with some soapy water or a little bit of WD-40 to make sure, just aid in getting your hangers in there. Shouldn't be too hard, but just put your sleeves on, get your 2 clamps over the sleeves, and then you want to fit it over the downpipes and get them tightened up. Remember, you want these things really tight. You want to make sure that the sleeve is fitted to where there's no room for any exhaust to escape from it. Make sure you got the clamps covering that keyhole that we talked about earlier. Get them up there, try and get them positioned to where the actual bolt is not underneath the pipe that can catch onto any debris or trash or anything like that. Try and angle them up. It can be a little difficult. There's not a lot of room to work there above the actual pipe, but get them good and tight, and then we'll move on to the next section. The next section we're going to connect are your mid pipes. At least that's what I'm calling them. These are the 2 pipes that go from your mid muffler to your Valvetronic mufflers. Kind of the same thing. You want to get the pipe aligned up and put a clamp over it, get it situated. These just slip over the metal that comes off of the mid pipe, or I'm sorry, comes off of the mid muffler. And you want to get them tightened, but not so tight that they can't be adjusted, because once you get everything connected here, you're going to have to do some adjusting. So get them on there, get them secured, get everything lined up, and then eventually we'll come back to absolutely tightening them down to where they don't move. Once your mid pipes are mounted, go ahead and get some WD-40 or something to spray the hangers for your Valvetronic mufflers. You want to spray each side of them. This will make it easier when you go to hang the actual mufflers, and you're going to connect these to the mid pipes the same way that you connected the mid pipes to your mid muffler. Just make sure you have a clamp over the metal, get it installed, tighten it up, but don't fully torque it all the way down because you're going to have to do some adjustment. Now, as I get this hung here, you're going to be able to see that the muffler is at kind of a weird angle. This is one of those areas that eventually, when you're ready to, you can use your jack stand with a piece of wood on it to press up underneath the muffler and get it aligned correctly. Now, I would suggest putting your diffuser back on the car to make sure you get it aligned perfect with your diffuser and everything. And then once you've got the alignment correct, you can tighten down all your clamps to keep it in that position and really tighten them. After you've gotten your exhaust fully installed and you've made the adjustments to make sure that it's situated correctly on the vehicle and aligned correctly with your bumper and your diffuser, then you can go in and you can start to actually tighten down all the pieces of the actual exhaust. You want to go through everything from the bolts that connect your downpipe to your catalytic converter or your test pipes all the way back. Make sure your hangers are nice and secure and get these things really tight. And if you've got an impact, I would suggest using an impact to really make sure that these are tight. You don't want this thing to start moving around after you start driving, but when you do start driving, check your exhaust every couple days or so and make sure everything's staying in place. Now we are ready to actually plug in the wiring harnesses into each of the solenoids for each of the mufflers. You can see it sitting there just above the exit pipe, that little black solenoid. That's where you're plugging into.
All right, guys, real quick on the wiring harness here, you see that gray tab? When this gets plugged in, that's a locking tab. So you plug this in and then you push that tab forward. It's a little bit of resistance, but push that all the way forward, it'll click, and then you'll know it's locked into place. So we're gonna go ahead and get this going.
This is going to be the final adjustment of your wiring harness and cables that go from underneath your car into the trunk of your car. You're going to go ahead and plug them into the manifold. So we're going to plug in the power cord, and then we're going to plug in the two solenoid cables that go from each of the Valvetronic mufflers. Once again, once you get these completely situated, clean up your cables, zip tie them, roll them up, zip tie them together, but make sure they're zip tied somewhere in the cavity there behind the trunk liner so that they can't eventually work themselves down through that rubber grommet and rest on the hot muffler, because they will melt if they fall back down there. Okay, so for now, my manifold, I've just got resting there in the cavity that is kind of behind the trunk liner, and I haven't permanently mounted it anywhere in there. I might try and get some double-sided tape or something to permanently fix it back there. But right now, we just want to get the power cord plugged in, and we want to actually test to make sure that the solenoids are working, that they're opening and closing before we close everything in the trunk up.
All right, guys, so we have the mufflers all wired up. Everything's installed. I haven't pieced everything back together or anything yet because I want to test the valves and make sure that they work before I get everything back together, because if I have to take something apart and get back in there again, I don't want to have to undo the whole car. But in order to do that, we have to get our remote working. So when you get it, it's going to have a piece of tape over it so that this piece doesn't fly over, but it's not going to be clipped down. So you want to pop this off here. Now you have your circuit board right here, and there's two Phillips head screws right there in the center, right here and here. I've already unscrewed these just to double check this, but what you have to do is you unscrew those, and then after that, you're just going to lift the board out real gently, like so. Once you do that, you flip it over, and that's where your battery compartment is. These will not ship with a battery in them. You're gonna have to buy one. I forgot to do that. So I harvested my battery out of my Audi remote. It's the same battery. And so it's got this little thing here that is supposed to hold it in. So we're gonna hopefully lift this up, push it in. This thing will cap over it. We push it all the way in. Let's get it all in here. I mean, I guess technically I could just use the board because the rest of this is just a housing. And then we're gonna screw it in and we'll test out the valves. Okay guys, so once you get the battery into your remote, before you completely close it, you wanna test it. Now there's gonna be a little LED on the circuit board and you can see that lights up red and it shows that it's working. So now we can test the actual valves. Okay, so found out that my cigarette lighter in my trunk is actually not working. It's not getting any power, so I'm gonna have to figure that out. But for now, I ran the cable to the cigarette lighter that is located in my center arm console. So here's what happens. Let me get this light right. You can see the valve. So if you press bottom on the remote, you hear that beep and then it opens. You press close on the top of the remote, the forward part of it, and it closes. And it's pretty quick. When you turn the car on, when the control module and the trunk gets power, it beeps. And then every time you open it or you press a button, it's going to beep as well. When you're ready to close your remote, you're going to get the top piece, set it on here, and you're going to press down really hard until it clicks. And it is hard. We might have to do this on a table. Hold on. Okay, so once you get your remote ready and you're ready to close it up completely, you're going to take your two pieces, you're going to press them on, and you have to press hard to get this thing on. It is really tight fit. The video that they sent us, you take it and you're going to put on a piece of table here and press like crazy until it clicks. But apparently I'm not strong enough. There's one click. There's two clicks. I'll look around the outside of it, make sure it's all sealed up. Looks like one more click in the back there. There you go. So you got one button at the top and one button at the bottom. And you got your LED to show that everything's working. Cool. Okay guys, we're about to button up everything on the car. The exhaust is fully installed, everything is wired. We need to put the trunk back together and clean up the wires. We're gonna do that in a bit. The exhaust was easy to go on, everything bolted up perfectly. There was nothing weird on the fitment, so I'm really happy about that. I turned the car on just to make sure that the valves worked while the car was actually running, and no issues at all. It sounds really good. I didn't rev it at all yet, but I'm excited about the sound of the car. Tomorrow when it's not pouring down rain, I'm going to take it out and get a few sound clips for you guys so you get an idea of what it is. But a video I'm going to make after this one will be a full-on sound clip video. That'll have cold starts from when the valves are open, when the valves are closed. We're going to have drive-bys. We're going to have acceleration videos. We're going to have videos from inside the car when we're driving it. You know, everything that we can do to give you guys a good idea and an accurate idea of what this exhaust sounds like as I have it set up. So other than that, the one thing that I did find doing all the wiring, getting power to the exhaust, to the solenoids, was that my rear trunk 12-volt battery, or 12-volt power supply, the cigarette light in the back on the right side of the trunk, doesn't work right now. I plugged everything up and tried to use the valves and nothing worked, and I about freaked out because I thought something was wrong with the solenoids. But it turns out that my 12-volt power supply in the back, something's wrong. It's more than likely a fuse that's gone bad. So I got to hunt that down. Right now the cord is just ran up to the center dash to plug in to make sure everything works. I'll leave it there till I figure out what's going on in the trunk. But I'm about to put the rear valence back on, and when I do that, I'll put the tips onto the rear mufflers and set them there and see how they fit in regards to the rest of the body of the car. If they don't fit right, we might have to get back under there, loosen each of the mufflers up and pull them out to make sure that the tips come out the correct amount from the valence so it looks good. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
One of the last things we have left to do is clean up the trunk. So we want to get all the wires situated, get them cleaned up. What I did was I unplugged everything and I just got my cables kind of wrapped together. I zip tied them to make sure that they were nice and clean, tucked them in behind the trunk liner to where they weren't interfering with anything else. And then once again, I just want to stress this: make sure the two cables that go through the trunk cavity into the bottom grommet, that go out to your mufflers, make sure those are secured to where they cannot have any slack that eventually falls down underneath the car, because if you don't do that, the movement of the car, the bumping around, will cause them to fall down and sag down, and they will melt on something hot on the exhaust. So make sure they're secured. But after you get that done, you can plug everything back up. Now, we'll say this, the plugs going into the manifold don't lock in there any well. They can get popped out pretty easily. So make sure when you get them plugged in and you get it back behind the trunk liner, they're in a spot that they won't move around and pull out. After that, make sure that you've got your 12-volt power supply plugged back up. You get the wiring harness plugged back up to it. As you can see, my power supply is running to the front of the car. That's just because I had a bad fuse for my trunk 12-volt power supply. I've since fixed that. And I will say this also, the 12-volt power plug does not like to stay plugged in to either of the 12-volt power supplies. It just doesn't fit really, really well. So I'm eventually going to be hard wiring mine into the trunk 12-volt power supply. But anyways, once everything's tucked back in there, you put your piece back into the trunk liner, pop it all back into place, and then you can put everything back together, make sure your battery's plugged up, put everything back in, close the trunk, and you're going to be done.
Wanted to jump in here and talk about something that I didn't get to cover when I was actually doing the DIY. When you are tightening up your exhaust, like once you get everything settled in there and you're tightening it up, you want to make sure that you've got the exhaust positioned correctly. When I did this, it was late, been working on it all day, filming and whatnot, and I just rushed through because I really wanted to hear it and get driving. And one thing that I just didn't even pay attention to was the alignment of the mufflers and how everything was aligned up. Mine were actually kind of at an angle. So you want to make sure that your mufflers are level and that they're positioned correctly. You want to make sure that the pretty much mid muffler and rear mufflers, all the piping, everything is up as high as it needs to be for you'll see the cavity in the car, like where the pipes are supposed to be, to make sure they're not low. A good way to do this if you're by yourself is get your jack and put 2x4s on it and jack the pipes up where you want them to be while the clamps are a little bit loose, and then once they're in the position that you want them, tighten them down. And guys, you got to really tighten these clamps. I tightened them and I thought, hey, that's good enough, and no, there was nowhere near. They kind of sagged a little bit, and that's where I got my issues with my S6 diffuser getting a little bit melted. If you haven't seen that video, you can go check that one out. But you got to get them really tight. So I would start at the mid muffler, make sure it's up high where it needs to be, tighten it down really good, move to those mid pipes that connect the mid muffler to your rear Valvetronic mufflers, and get those where they need to be. Use, like I said, use a jack stand to get your muffler level and exactly where it needs to be, aligned with your valence and everything, and then just tighten the crap out of it. Okay, if you are finding trouble doing this by yourself at home, try and get a friend to come over, or maybe this is a point where you just go ahead and really quick run it to a exhaust shop and have them just button it up and adjust it for you correctly. But other than that, it's really straightforward. Everything fits great. The fitment is perfect. I had to play around with it to figure that out. At first I thought I had some issues, but overall fitment is spot on for the exhaust. Couldn't be happier.